Urban explorers, what is your creepiest or most horrifying experience? I explored an old parking lot that was about 7 floors tall. The first few floors were somewhat normal, with recently parked cars and a few people loitering around, but it got creepier and more decrepit the higher up you went, with abandoned rusty cars covered in dust and weird red graffiti on the walls. Upon reaching the roof of the building, I could see a lifeless bird, which upon close inspection seemed to be perfectly dissected down the middle. A dark staircase led to a locked metal door on the roof, with strange noises coming from it. On the way down, some really tall dude began to walk toward us quickly from across the floor. When we reached the exterior of the building, we waited for a while, only for a knife to drop in front of us from inside the building. That place is fun. An old rotten 3-story house. I live in the north woods of Wisconsin. Up here there are a lot of hidden places to find. Mostly because over the years many people like to hide out here. Al Capone had several beach houses and hides, for example. Me and a couple of friends went searching for a house we heard was haunted once. We did not find the supposed haunted house, but we found an old hidden driveway. It was too overgrown to be seen from the road. We just happened upon it while searching on foot. A week later we went back to see what was at the end. We found a 3-story Victorian, pretty rotten and derelict. We got in through a hole in the wall that was in the back, worked our way past bushes and prickers, but we made it. Most of the place was gutted and we had to tread pretty carefully. There were rotten patches in the floors, so we had to be careful. This was old, and I mean old. The plumbing was ancient, no electrical outlets to be found, and old oil lamp sconces. We worked our way to the second floor and found a couple of bedrooms, what we think was an office or study and a powder room. No cool antiques though. We got so caught up in it that we were there until dark when we made it to the basement. There were 2 ways down. We used the stairs in the back because the front set seemed too unsafe. There we found an old furnace, a coal chute, and a couple of storage rooms. There was not much light down there. The bushes outside covered the windows, so the only light came in from a hole in the upper floor. Thing is that it was getting dark by the time we started snooping down there, so by the time we noticed it was already pretty dark out. Note we know what we are doing, so we had the basics, 1 med kit, a light for each, and a rope we carried just in case. After looking around we found some back storage rooms, both with thick metal doors. The first was already open and empty, the second was rusted shut. We did not want to give up, so we found some old cast iron railings that fell from who knows where, and we pried that sucker apart. I say apart because first the handle came off, then we stuck the railing through the hole with the rope and just pulled it open. Took us the better part of an hour to do all that considering, but we were stubborn and we wanted to see what was in there. The room had no window, so it was pretty dark. What we found was a bunch of old filing cabinets and a small desk with a chair. Most of the cabinets were seized shut due to age, but the ones we got open just had old documents. Nothing seemed special about the place, and by this point we were getting pretty tired. We finally noticed it was dark, so we decided to head back out. As we were slowly making our way back up the steps, we started to hear a howling sound from the basement. It got real loud and we got really freaked out. We paused long enough to search with our lights where it may have been coming from, but after that fear took us and we got the heck out of there. After we calmed down and were safely a few miles away back on the highway, we started to talk about it. A friend figured it was actually the old coal furnace and the above chimney. Like when you blow over the lip of a bottle that made the sound, but for the fun of it we all decided it was just an angry spirit that got mad because we were searching through his stuff. Much better than exploring an old, maybe, haunted house any day. When I was in college, a few friends and I went to this local abandoned hotel. It was a swanky place back in like the 50s, but had just been sitting around abandoned and fenced off ever since. We walked by and saw an open window on a 2nd-story ledge and ended up finding an old wooden ladder nearby on the property. We went in and hung around and saw a bit of great graffiti. The whole place was trashed with actual garbage as well as bits of the building that were falling apart. We made it up the staircase to the 3rd floor, looking in each of the rooms. The area we were in used to be the housing for the staff of the hotel. The 3rd floor was covered in garbage from throughout the years. We got to the last room on the 3rd floor and looked in to find a lit candle with no one else around. Realizing we were not alone, we booked it out of there, and once we were outside, we looked up to see someone watching us from one of the windows. We went to college in a city with a significant homeless problem and assumed we had just stumbled onto someone's home, but it still really freaked us out. They cemented up the place after another explorer fell down an open elevator shaft and broke his legs, and it has recently been renovated and they are turning it into an apartment building. Not the creepiest find, but definitely freaked us out in the moment. A group of my friends and I explored an abandoned asylum and mental hospital a couple years ago in the OKC metro. Very unsafe at night for silly college freshmen like ourselves. The first experience we had was all of us taking our time enjoying the darkness and generally messing around. You have to come in through a broken window, and we were all gathered at the window just being dumb when we heard loud echoing footsteps down the hall running toward us. We all did that. Who the heck isn't here? Who's messing with us? Look and turn and, after realizing we were all present and none of us were sprinting down a dark abandoned hallway, we bolted out of there. The second time, we could hear a group of people messing with us, jumping from around corners and such, but they never got too close. We assumed it was an animal at first, but got brave and realized it was a person. We managed to catch them and, after staring at a collection of seemingly drugged-up 20-somethings who begged us for cans of paint and cigarettes, we got the not-so-good vibes and tried to leave. The leader of the haunted asylum cronies asked if we had jewelry, which we denied. He then said the creepiest thing I have heard in my life. I like jewelry. I take it off the girls here when they sleep. We ran out of there fast. This happened 8 years ago when I was a sophomore in high school. My urban exploration friends and I were on a bike ride looking for cool places to explore in a relatively dilapidated area when we discovered a really creepy cave, an old abandoned cement mine we later learned. We did some mild exploring that first day but quickly realized it would require more gear to thoroughly explore, like flashlights and respirators. About a week later 5 of us came back with the proper gear and a camera to see what we could find in the mine. We discovered there was basically one main shaft that sloped downward and deeper into the earth, so we followed that main route. It was wide enough for a car to drive down and was pretty well graded so the walking was easy. There were many rooms, old machinery, and rusting equipment off this main shaft, but we mostly avoided it in the beginning, trying not to get lost or confused. Along the way the walls were littered with the classic abandoned graffiti. X was here, initials and dates, random drawings, etc. As we got deeper though the graffiti really thinned out. At this point the light from the entrance was long gone and we were relying solely on flashlights. The air was so stagnant and hazy with particles that the light from our flimsy flashlights would only go 20 feet or so before getting totally obscured by dust. The glow sticks we brought to mark our way were basically useless because they would disappear in the haze only a few steps after dropping them, and we had only brought 10 or so. At this point we started arguing among ourselves. Several of the crew were nervous about going any deeper with the air quality being so terrible and without a good way to prevent us from getting lost. We were probably a quarter mile into the earth now. The rest of us managed to override that fear by assuring them that the path was easy and straightforward so we would have to try to get lost. We were going to rely on our level-headedness, sense of direction, and flashlight battery life to get out. Despite the agreement to push on, it was becoming very creepy for everyone. We walked for a while in silence, hearing nothing but our own movements and the steady drip of water coming from somewhere deep in the cave. I think we were all pretty scared at this point but no longer willing to admit it. Then we stumbled across something that made all of us stop cold. Dug into the side of the deep stone shaft we were descending was a tunnel, an offshoot. It was narrow, you had to crouch to go through it, and it was a few feet off the ground so it required a scramble to reach it. But that was not what made us stop. It was the graffiti. We had not seen any for 10 minutes or so and had assumed the artists never came this deep. But someone clearly had, and the message they left was ominous. The tunnel was lined with words written in white, all relating to harm. Scrawled throughout were words like suffering, pain, plague, disease, and hell. It was pretty terrifying. Who else would come this far just to write such a terrible message in a mysterious tunnel that broke from the main path? But there was no turning back now, we had to see where the tunnel led. Despite our fear we were overpowered by intense curiosity. So one by one we crawled through the tunnel to the other side. What we found was a strange flooded chamber. Around the pool of water were many large stones, each covered with dozens of burned-out tea candles. There must have been hundreds of used tea candles in the place. The walls had a few creepy monster faces poorly graffitied on them and the tunnel entrance back to the main shaft was ringed with a spray-painted blood-stained mouth. What was this place? Some weird ritual site? An elaborate hoax set up by a bunch of kids? We could not find much evidence to figure it out and we were running out of adrenaline to keep exploring. We all crawled out of that weird chamber and back into the main shaft where we promptly headed toward the exit. When we finally saw that pinprick of natural light coming from the real world outside we were flooded with relief. We never did figure out what that mysterious cavern was for and I think I am content to leave it a mystery. No, we did not hear any monsters in the depths or find anyone down there, but just finding that room buried deep in an old forgotten mine was enough to creep all of us out for a long time. Me and a few friends decided to explore this abandoned children's hospital we'd heard about, which was in a small village about an hour from us. We get there and it's this huge plot of land, trees surrounding the whole place and the building in the center, real creepy looking. We had to climb up a wall to get inside, as we could not get in on the ground floor and had to go through a window that was ajar. After climbing through, the place is a mess, rubble everywhere, but it looked completely desolate as if no one else had been inside in years. Anyway, we basically went straight up to the roof, sat and had a few beers, then went home. I decided to go back a few days later with my girlfriend to have a proper look around because I wanted to explore it. We went in the building and immediately there was a different vibe unlike the other night. We jumped over the broken staircase to get to the ground floor. This was next to a large heavy-duty wooden door with multiple bolts and chains over it, and found a trapdoor with a ladder underneath which led to the basement. I convinced my girlfriend to come with me, but she would not explore the basement when we were there, just stayed at the bottom of the ladder with her torch while I had a quick look around. That's when it got really scary. I walked past some machines into the small room which was completely empty with the exception of a kicked-over chair and a noose hanging from a pipe directly above the chair. I completely freaked out, not literally, and turned round to leave, when on the wall there was red graffiti, not prepared to believe it was blood because there was a lot, saying, "Don't come back." Needless to say, I have not been back. My girlfriend told me after she felt like I was gone for about an hour, when I was only 5 or 10 minutes, and she kept hearing whispers from the dark corridors and the trapdoor fell shut above her at one point for no apparent reason. Very scary place, would love to go back with more people, but that really messed me up. My friends and I used to explore this old factory or processing plant, no idea what it was originally. Anyway, it had lots of underground sections which were pitch black even a couple of meters from the entrance, but which also required going down a flight of stairs. One time we found a burned out car 2 or 3 levels down, no idea how it got in there, but that was kind of creepy. Another time we found a hole. We did not bring torches, flashlights, with us because we are idiots, but we had lighters and were trying to figure out what the hole was or if it could lead anywhere. We put a stick in there and it ended up being at least 6 feet deep, but we also learned that it was full of some liquid and if we had fallen in we could have easily drowned in the dark. Another time we went a couple of levels down and one of us at the bottom started screaming shrieks of absolute terror and the rest of us thought someone was going to take our lives. We all started running, everyone was screaming at this point, there was this sludgy stuff on the ground and some of us slipped and fell just like in a horror movie, slipping and sliding, our limbs out of control. Again, there were 6+ people screaming like crazy with absolute fear and terror on their faces, so we all thought someone was going to take our lives. Turned out a bird had made a nest down there and my sister got spooked and my friend screamed like crazy. We were kids exploring an underground flood channel. There were spots we could climb up and dangle our arms out of the storm drains on the street, but that required crawling up weird diagonal tunnels. There were 4 of us, maybe 12 years old. 1 flashlight. The walls were all graffitied with a lot of gang stuff and even warnings to turn back. We just took it as other kids that were bored. We got to the spot where the ceiling angled down quite low to the point the opening was so small we had to crawl to continue. Challenge accepted. It looked like it opened up again shortly. So we crawled through 5 or 6 feet of the low area and when it opened back up, it looked like we were in a large round concrete pipe before it was square or rectangular. Still lots of graffiti. We started yelling and playing with the echoes, then we thought we heard something, so we got quiet. Then a real loud, "You are going to freaking die," came echoing from the darkness. The kid with the flashlight ran so fast and the rest of us were left in absolute darkness. Anyway, this was the first time we went past the low spot, but the last time we went down there. None of us died that day, the rest of us ended up quietly and slowly walking out in the darkness. Last winter I went into this abandoned parking lot under a closed shopping mall. It had 2 levels. The upper level had a bit of sunlight going in through the windows, but the lower level was pitch black. I made my way down this wide ramp that the cars would use and decided to have a look at the bottom level. After turning my flashlight on I noticed that the space was huge, much bigger than the upper level. I remember how the light danced through the many supporting pillars and cast vivid shadows. I said, "Hello," and "I'm just taking a look around," just to make my intentions clear, but was met with no response. So I decided to walk around for a bit, but could not see anything of interest, Just a lot of junk and some empty old bottles, but nothing that might indicate someone living or hanging around there. The place seemed completely abandoned, however this uneasy feeling that someone might be hiding in the pitch-black shadow of one of those pillars took the better of me and I climbed back up the ramp. I left taking a different route and passed under an overhead clearing that snow had fallen through. Just as I was about to hop the fence and leave, I noticed that the patch of snow that had formed had footprints in it. I know this does not really sound horrifying when you read it, as the logical explanation was that some poor chap had probably taken shelter from the cold inside the lot. But still, being there creeped the heck out of me. I had one creepy experience I already told, but my friends who always go exploring told me about this time. They were just following a trail that went into the hills, and after almost reaching the freeway, they ended up near an old closed-up train tunnel. They were able to squeeze through some loose fencing, and after wandering through with nothing of interest, they eventually came to a bunch of shipping containers. They told me that when they glanced inside, they saw a ton of guns and ammo in one and just a whole lot of heavy boxes in the rest. After a few minutes of checking it out, they heard voices from further down the tunnel coming closer, so they got out of there. They also said it almost smelled like the ocean towards the end, so the tunnel might have led out near the beach. The place they hiked to was somewhere between Santa Barbara and Oxnard in California, as they stopped on the 101 going southbound and started their hike and ended up returning to the car and going to Oxnard at the end of the day. They made a report to the police, but I have not heard of anything coming of that on the news or otherwise. Also, some people said it might be smugglers, but given that the crates were unlocked, the tunnel was unguarded, and it was accessible to anyone who wandered out there, I doubt that is the case. If it was, they were either just about to take off or they were really stupid. Not urban exploration, rural exploration I suppose you could call it. I was working on a project for a photography project, and there is a massive forest up a mountain near where I live. Said forest contains an abandoned hospital that was shut down after an unexplained death. After a few hours, I found a small camp with some abandoned tools, including a massive bolt cutter. Someone had tried to destroy them in a fire, but that was a no-go. Maybe 200 to 300 meters away, I found a burned-out car. Not an uncommon sight in the area. Kids buy super beat-up, clapped-out bangers and trash them up there. Not far away, about running distance, I found a pair of women's jeans. And a little bit further away from that, maybe 5 meters or so, there was a pair of panties hanging off a low branch. They had clearly been there for a while. I am not sure how long underwear would last exposed to Irish weather, and these were right out in the open, but a few weeks maybe. Pretty creepy, finding all that, all alone in the woods. I flipped through local news for anything on any break-ins or assaults or anything suspicious, and could not find anything that had happened recently. There was an abandoned hotel I was checking out, gained access through a blown-out window near the indoor pool. It smelled like death inside, and I came to find a couple of bloated lifeless deer in the slime collected towards the deep end of the pool. That should have been my sign to go. I made my way into the lobby and banquet areas, came across a couple of raccoons and squirrels who scurried away swiftly. Everything was destroyed, even the reception desk had been ripped in half. Nothing interesting to photograph, just trash. Neat little piles of trash. After a bit of searching I found the stairwell. There was an odd noise coming from above that I brushed off as rain. I decided to skip a couple floors because they were probably in the same condition as the lobby, and a lot of the exterior windows had been blown out. I got to 4 and opened the door, not worried about noise as I was confident that I was the only sober person on the premises, if not the only person. As I pulled the door open, the rain noise suddenly ceased, completely. I pointed my flashlight down the hallway and saw hundreds of geese poke their heads out of the guest rooms. I remember the moment where nothing moved and we just stared at each other as lasting several minutes, though I am sure it was about 10 seconds. Here I am, in the middle of the hall, geese of abandoned luxury staring me down. Once the initial shock of the sight wore off, I remembered I was only looking at half of the floor. Behind me the geese were not pulling a deer in the headlights, they were coming towards me. Time to go. I closed the stairwell door behind me, only muffling the cacophony that erupted once I moved. As I hustled down the stairs I realized the signs were there. Goose droppings everywhere. I hit the lobby and turned towards the pool where a group of geese had collected as if they were trying to trap me. Luckily, they are just dumb birds. I got out to find the exterior of the hotel swarming with the geese. There was one lone sentinel standing on the roof, honking out a shrill command that the perimeter had been breached. I should have stayed to get more pictures, but I was done, covered in filth from a slip down the stairs, and did not feel like collecting fresh droppings from the dive bombers circling overhead. There is an abandoned East Coast insane asylum that I have often seen posted, both on Reddit and various other places around the internet. I have been there probably 10 or 15 times over the course of a decade, and each time I have found something new, as the complex is very spread out and very massive. What I have never seen posted, nor even mentioned, however, is the maze of tunnels beneath the complex. Connecting each building is a subterranean network of tunnels for steam, water, sewage, and electric. The tunnels are all roughly 10 to 15 feet underground and quite long. They lead into the basement of each structure in a portion of the complex, with an emergency escape hatch that leads out into the woods between buildings in a portion. One weird thing is that most of the entrances to the tunnel system are hidden in the walls. I exited through a door once and found myself in a room that was the complex's post office, where I had literally been 5 times before, and had never noticed that there was a hidden passage integrated into the wood paneling. The complex has been abandoned for 20 to 30 years, so parts of the tunnels are very wet with leaking water. When you are down in them, you constantly hear environmental noise, as well as echoes from your own movements. There is nothing reflective down there, and there are no outside sources of light. If you do not have a bright enough flashlight, it can get kind of difficult to make out features of things in the distance, and you are relying a lot upon the slight tonal differences of what you can see to determine what something is off in the distance before you are right up on it. Go out on a moonless night and shine an LED penlight against a concrete wall from like 15 feet away to get an idea what I am talking about. Now, for the terror. First of all, I have a stupid habit of going into these places by myself. I have recently started correcting this, because you never know when an accident could happen, leaving you alone, underground, in the dark. The last time I was in the tunnels, I was by myself, with a single AA battery-powered 75 to 100 lumen LED flashlight. Mistake number 2. During this excursion, I decided to follow the tunnel down to what was the water treatment building for the complex. This tunnel slopes downward, so the leaking water previously mentioned runs down and collects at the tunnel's end. So, at the end of the tunnel, I enter this large room with 2 15-foot tall water storage tanks. There is probably an inch of water and muck on the floor, which makes a squelching noise when you walk. I am standing still, looking around with my flashlight, and from the opposite side of the room, around 20 feet away, I hear a squelch, then another squelch. There is someone else in this underground room with me. I shine my flashlight across the room and do not see anything, but keep hearing the wet footprints. All of a sudden, I shine the light on this human-shaped object that is just black. There is no difference in shading or anything, it is just like a shadow against the peach-colored concrete wall. I stammer out a, "hello," and all of a sudden, I can see this person's 2 eyes flash up, reflecting back my flashlight, but that is it. I do not know if the person was in a ghillie suit or what, but it is impossible to make out anything distinguishing. I do not know what kind of weirdo sets out in a full black getup to rummage around underground. So, at this point, I flip out. I spin 180 degrees on my heels and bolt. I am flying up the inclined tunnel, slipping and sliding all over the place on the damp concrete. I fell a handful of times, sprained my wrist badly, and got a number of cuts on my one knee. That run through the underground tunnels felt like an eternity. If you have ever seen the subway scene from the movie, 28 Weeks Later, that is the closest thing I can approximate it to. It was the closest thing I have ever experienced to a living nightmare. I have never been so terrified in all my life. Looking back, I am sure whoever I met down there in the dark was probably as terrified as I was, unless they were completely unhinged. I have no reason to believe they followed me, and they probably ran back the way they came, same as I did. I noticed that they did not have a flashlight on, so what I think probably happened is that they noticed my light and pulled a hoodie up over their head, turned their light off, and tried to hide as best they could. Sorry if this got a little long and rambly, just wanted to share my part here. If there is a takeaway from this, it can be summed up in a single fantastic sentence. Don't enter strange underground tunnels, through hidden doors, beneath long abandoned and forgotten insane asylums, with a single tiny flashlight when you're by your lonesome.